Hey everyone, welcome to Talks with Titans. At Prodigy Leadership Academy, we're on a mission to facilitate the passing of torches and wisdom from people who have lived lives of success and impact onto our students. In this week's episode, students Bethany and Colton had the opportunity to learn from Stacy Kinder, the current mayor of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Mayor Kinder is from Hot Springs, Arkansas. She earned a track scholarship to Vanderbilt University, where she met her future husband, John Kinder. The two married and moved to Memphis, where she completed her Bachelor of Science degree in physics from the University of Memphis. She then taught high school physics and math until becoming a stay-at-home mom when their first child was born. The Kinders moved back to Cape in 2000, and in the time since, Mayor Kinder has served in several ministries, notably in Young Life. After being highly involved in school activities as her kids grew up in the public school system, she served on the Cape Girardeau School Board for 6 years and was elected to Cape City Council in 2018. And, most recently, she was elected mayor in 2022. I've known Mayor Stacy Kinder for quite some time. Her son, Matthew, has been one of my best friends since we began high school together in 2015. Even as a 15-year-old going over to the Kinder's house, I remember that my friends and I recognized that Stacy was welcoming and thoughtful, but also that she was pretty no-nonsense. And so, because of this, we were usually on our best behavior. But in seriousness, that's such an important character trait for a leader. She doesn't beat around the bush. When she sees something that needs to be done, she does it. She doesn't mess around. In this episode, Stacy shares a lot about her experiences with leadership throughout her life, and how her Christian faith has shaped her into the leader she is today. I learned some important lessons in this episode, and I know you will too. So without further ado, here's Mayor Stacy Kinder.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talks with Titans. Super excited to have Mayor Stacy Kinder here with us as our special guest Titan. And also we have Bethany here with us today and Colton. And I know we're going to learn a lot of fantastic things from our community leader. And for me personally, I've known you over some time period.
Been a while.
Yes, it has.
It has.
But I've always appreciated how you and your husband love to serve. You love to find opportunities to connect. And you're especially involved in Young Life in particular and have been for many years. And for me, I'm excited to go back and understand more about your growing up time, your schooling experience, and all the things that prepared you for leadership, because leadership's an important deal. And these students mostly are going to be asking the questions, but occasionally I might fill in. And I would love to start with a question.
Hit it.
Tell us a little bit about your family and what kind of student you were when you were in school.
Okay, well, gosh, where to begin? I had two siblings, grew up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Transplants there from St. Louis, actually, but that was where I grew up. Great fun place to grow up. A lot like Cape, except they have a horse track right in the center of town and a lake, so those are differences.
Yeah.
And
older or younger siblings?
I have a twin sister.
What?
And yes, and a younger brother.
Nice. Okay.
And school was important in our family, and my parents always valued that, and we did too. Sports was a big part of my life, actually, growing up. I was one of those very active, rambunctious girls, and thankfully, even back in that day, there were athletic opportunities growing for girls, and that became a big part of my life, and actually helped me get to college on an athletic scholarship. So ended up at Vanderbilt University, running track and cross country, and thankfully, that's a competitive college to go to, and so that was having that background was essential. I found that to be a challenging place to be, but that's where I met my husband, who is from Cape Girardeau, and that's the long story about how I ended up in Cape in 2000. So,
twin sister.
Yeah. Yes.
And when you have a twin. And are you guys identical twins?
We're fraternal twins.
Fraternal
Two girls,
twins.
But we're fraternal. So,
okay,
yeah.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. With a twin, do you guys get along super well? Do you actually understand each other in unique ways that other people might not, other siblings?
A lot of people tell us that is the case, yes. Not like in those very interesting super twin, like identical twin kind of situations.
You didn't feel
but
pain when she experienced it?
No, did not.
Okay.
And actually, we were very different growing up. I was, like I said, very sporty, kind of the tomboy, always running around with the boys and, skinning my knees and, getting dirty and stuff. And she was a more, she liked to do dancing and she was quieter. Until high school, our personalities became much more similar, I would say. But really have been very good friends, probably since then, for sure.
Nice. Your family, they still reside in that area?
They do. They're still there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area, isn't it?
Fun place to visit.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
So yeah, I met my husband at Vanderbilt, and we got married, and he's a physician here, and so we did a little traveling around where he went to med school and then residency, but we ended up in Cape after he got done with all that, and we have 4 children here that we've raised here in Cape.
When you were going through school, your growing up years, did you see yourself as a leader? Did you have some leadership qualities that even back then were kind of being exhibited somehow?
I think so. I think, we're probably all familiar with the kid who speaks up a lot in class or tends to want to be the head of this or that. I was that kid without having, leadership vocabulary around it. And then, noticed in junior high and high school, I would run for, student council things like that. Throughout life then too, realizing that I tended to end up in those positions with the things I got involved in. Those roles became bigger and bigger. Ultimately, I think it was 2008 when I ran for school board here in Cape Girardeau and did that for 6 years, and was the board president for 2 of those years. Then of course, in 2018 got on the city council here, and in 2022 ran for mayor, which is basically the head of the city council. So, long story short there, but to answer your question, yes, I think there's sometimes some personality traits that go along with leadership. There's a lot of learned skills that can make you a bad or a good leader, and so I've definitely always been interested in learning about how to be effective, good leader. That's always been an interest, So yes, I guess is the answer.
I appreciate you sharing that, and it's interesting that even back in your school years, you had that confidence so that you could assert yourself. Mm-hmm. How would you define leadership? And even if you look back at your growing up years, do you think your way of defining or how you define leadership has changed?
Yeah, I think, for a lot of kids or younger people, you tend to just think of leadership as, whoever's in charge. And in a certain sense, I guess that's true. The most basic definition, of course, is, you're a leader if people are following you in something. Doesn't mean you're necessarily a good leader, right? But if you're in a position where you're doing things and people are, in some way following you, you're a leader. It's so interesting. I've of course, there's thousands of books you can read on leadership. There's different styles of leadership. There's different personalities that make leadership look different, right? Different jobs require different types of leadership. So I don't believe there's like a one size fits all scenario for leadership. Different people are going to want and need different kinds of leadership from others, right? But I do think some core things are important. I think to be a good, effective leader, the folks you're leading need to trust that you're being authentic, that you have the good of the group at the forefront. I think we all can probably think of an example of somebody who's in a leadership position and you're just kind of disgusted by, the attitude or you can tend to clearly see if someone is after a leadership position for themselves versus the betterment of the group or the organization. So I've tried to always be interested in differentiating between those two.
So understanding your motives as a leader,
Right.
to take care of the people, to serve the people, to make their lives better. Nice.
Well, and that's a definition, I guess, of servant leadership, right? And there are different styles of leadership, but that is certainly one. And I think too, being a Christian, and ultimately, seeing Jesus as a profoundly impactful leader, not just in a whole religious sense, but just in the world. He was obviously the perfect example of what servant leadership should look like.
Yes.
And so, the Bible is a great place to see actually very good examples of leadership and very bad examples of leadership. There are plenty of stories in there that show what not to do. So.
Yes.
You said that you were kind of leader of the group your whole life. So what is some hard things that come along with that? So what's something that you can really pinpoint and say, ooh, that's especially hard for me, and how could you grow from that?
I would say for myself, especially in younger years, like I said before, it's easy to assume that being the leader or being the head of something is maybe more of a popularity contest, right? So just learning, realizing that with leadership, I think always comes some actual responsibility. And the level of that certainly varies, depending on what organization you're talking about. But with that, then coming to really see leadership as an opportunity to serve, not to have a title, not to have some kind of prestige or power trip in my own mind at all. Ultimately it's become a very humbling thing for me to realize that I have this position and I'm called to use it in a way that betters the community in my example as mayor. So can't say that you can't say that I've done that perfectly at all times. So yeah, I can think back and didn't get that right. That always happens, but learning from those things and just constantly trying to think about or learn how to do it better. I don't think anyone is born with leadership skills or any other skill, and then they don't need to develop that further. I think leadership, like any other trait or gift, needs to be developed. Teaching, same thing. There's a whole list in the Bible of gifts that we're given, but I think we're called to be responsible with those gifts and use them the way God wants us to.
And earlier you said that you were always the one who would run for student council and stuff. Do you think that's kind of where you got your love for being a politician or start in politician? I'm
not sure I love being a politician. I'll say that. I'll start off with that right away.
It's got to be challenging.
I did not think about, in fact, probably after 10th grade or something, I did not ever consider politics. I never saw that as an adult path that I would have. Never aspired to do anything like this or to run for, congressman or, governor or, anything. Just wasn't on my radar at all. I went to college with the intention of being a teacher. And that's what I did. I actually started out in secondary ed, long story, but ended up getting a degree in physics and then taught high school physics and math for a couple of years until started having kids. And then I was a stay-at-home mom since 1996, which is when we had our first child. So that was that was the path I was on. Never imagined getting involved in politics at all, until I really started to feel a call in my life to do so. It was actually because I was here in Cape, getting involved with a lot of things with the schooling, with what my kids were doing at school, and so was a class mom and started really getting involved in just whatever school issues. That long story, but that led me to eventually run for school board. Got on the school board, did that for 6 years here. Then a few years after that, really felt that running for city council was something I was supposed to do. So that's the story of how I find myself as a politician. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I'm a politician. How did this happen? I don't really fully understand it some days.
You used the word calling in there a couple times. What would you say? How do you experience that? How does that happen? That you thought, school board, I think I'm supposed to do it, or it's a calling?
Well, as I said, I became a Christian when I was a high school student. So growing in my faith was a big part of that, and learning. Of course, I had grown up in church, so knew the Bible stories and things like that. But really started diving into the Bible, really finding out, learning about who God was, who Jesus was, what kind of actual relationship God wanted to have with me, and then how that might impact my daily life, basically. And so that takes time. I mean, my faith as a 18-year-old looks very different than it does now, because I wasn't working full time. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had the opportunities to volunteer in many ways. Serving on the school board and the city council are both essentially volunteer jobs. But also, most importantly, just knowing through a lot of prayer, through a lot of discussing with my husband and talking to friends and to people who I really trusted and admired. Feeling like that really was something, an area that God was placing on my heart as a way to serve my community. And so that I just slowly, and I'll say this, when I first started getting an inkling that might be an area that I was supposed to dive into, I resisted it because it didn't make sense to me on paper. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something that I had really planned to do or considered. So it took a while, and it took a lot of prayer time and asking and listening to what I felt, was God's voice.
It is challenging to describe that. I agree with you. To describe how a calling happens. What were you thinking about, Bethany?
So I was going to ask another question. So you said that you became a Christian when you were a teenager. So how do you think you have grown, and how have you seen God work through your life?
We could be here for hours. My gosh. Oh, what a great question. I'm sorry. The first part of your question was,
basically, how did you become a Christian?
Yeah. Well, I was I was involved in FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we went to a weekend conference. And, like I said, I had grown up in church, felt like that, checked that box. But I remember my leader, she was a college student, and we ended up having a nice, quiet conversation. And she just said, what do you think about all this? And I said, well, I don't know. I've never heard really about, having an actual relationship with God. I mean, we go on Sunday, and that's, I thought that was it. And, really when you start to read the Bible, you realize that's not it. That's not it at all. The Bible just is this big love letter from God to us about wanting to know us and wanting us to look towards Him. And so just, I think, starting to actually read that and, looking back, it was almost like every day just realizing, wow, I've heard this before, but I've never heard this before, I guess my ears were open to some things there. So it wasn't, probably one of the more dramatic conversions that you might hear about, but it was a gradual learning about that kind of relationship that God wants to have with us. I would just say, going through life and looking through that lens, a lens of knowing that God is right here with me through hard times, also through great times, and being grateful for blessings, but also even during when things don't go my way or going through some valleys, that we're supposed to have that sense of we can still have joy even in the bad moments. That's been probably the biggest life-changing aspect that my Christian faith has given me.
So what advice would you give someone who is younger about like pursuing a relationship with Christ?
Oh, I would simply say, first of all, ask a bunch of questions to people that who are Christians, maybe even people who aren't Christians, about how they deal with things, how they get through life. But certainly, if there's somebody trusted, that maybe a youth leader or somebody at your church or a parent or family member or teacher or friend who is has what is a Christian faith, you can start asking questions about that. But also, just crack open a Bible and start reading it and see if you believe it. I would guarantee that you can't read the Bible and not be impacted in some way. On one hand, there's just some great practical advice, right? Parts of the Bible just talk about practical living, and how you can be nice, that kind of thing. But it's obviously so much deeper than that, and especially when you read the Gospels and really learn about what Jesus's life looked like and his attitudes, and why he came to earth and all of that. That's mind altering. So.
And it helps if your dad is a pastor, which he is.
Oh, so maybe you have someone in your life that you can. Why are you asking me?
No, that was great. I loved it. I love.
Forget what I said. Just go home and talk to your dad.
I loved your answer, but I love the fact that you do ask that, because even sometimes pastors' children might have some of the toughest times, because instead of just accepting something from the parents, they kind of have to go through their own sort of wrestling, maybe.
Sure. Well, and here's the hardest thing: anyone who stands up and talks about their Christian faith and says they're a Christian is automatically set up for attack, because we're all sinful. We all mess up, and especially family. They know you best, and
they see all your shortcomings.
Yes, my kids, my husband, they see me at my worst moments. But I can say my Christian faith is the only reason I can look at my kids and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or to be able to say to people, or at least think it, you just made me really mad, but I forgive you. It is only because of my Christian faith that I can ever have those, attitudes towards people.
What do you think was like a big turning point in your life where you decided to like give your life to God and do what he wanted you to do?
I remember at some point in high school, I was reading through the Gospels, and for the first time kind of putting it all together and reading about Jesus being in the garden right before, he was arrested and crucified, but where he's praying with God and wrestling with what he knows is about to happen. And his statement, his prayer is basically, God, I don't want to do this, but let your will be done. And I kind of got chills, because I remember having chills when I first came across that, and realizing, maybe there's a purpose to my life that is not just me being happy every minute of the day, or not just my own desires and goals and, selfish whatevers. That was the first moment where I realized that this journey with God is about something more important than myself.
So that stood out to you and really captured you in a way that caused you to think life is about doing the hard things even when I don't want to. It's about obeying God.
Obeying God, yeah. Living your life in a way that God wants you to. And so that impacts your behavior, everyday behavior. It impacts perhaps what you decide to do with your life and all that. So.
Do you go by Stacy?
Yes.
Mayor Kinder, Mrs. Kinder, what?
All that.
What do people call
I have
you?
all sorts of.
You have
Mom.
titles,
Right?
Yeah, Mom. What are your favorite titles? What do most people?
A lot of people are deferential and will say Mayor Kinder, and all that. It's taken me a while to just at least get used to that. And I think for the most part, people just are trying to be polite. I haven't had a long professional background, so I'm not used to titles like that, I usually just tell people, oh, you can call me Stacy. No, I'll call you Mayor Kinder. Yeah, okay, fine.
Well, being Cape Girardeau's first woman mayor is a big deal, really. I mean, that's historic.
Sure.
And why don't you share a little bit with us about the feeling and the thoughts and how it changes you to accomplish something that you think this is a big accomplishment or an achievement. We know you're not bragging, but it's simply acknowledging the truth of the matter, that is a big deal.
I honestly haven't spent much of any time thinking about that. And I'm not sure why. Except that, this may go back to my tomboy days. I'll explain why. I was often the only girl playing, soccer at recess with all the boys. Football, basketball, whatever. I'm not saying I was great at it. I'm just saying that was often the only, I grew up playing in like city leagues on teams. I was often the only girl, or maybe there was one other girl on the team. They were co-ed, but there were no, at least where I grew up, there were no just girl teams. If girls wanted to play, we could play. Yay. But we had to, And not until junior high school did I hit, I played on my school teams, and those were, of course, girl teams. Thankfully so. But I've wondered if that, what that gave me was a very foundational sense of this idea that you got to measure up to play, to make the team.
Interesting.
So can I do the work or not? Can I do this job of mayor well or not? And does it matter if I'm female or male? I don't tend to think so. I do know there are probably some biases, people, probably was hard for some people to, I look different, right, than our previous mayors. And, that maybe was hard for some people to think through or whatever. I just always felt like I needed to be able to explain to people why I would be a good choice for this job and why I'm continuing to be a good mayor. And I just haven't found that, the male-female conversation has been...
It's not that much of a... Okay.
Maybe in some people's minds, but I just haven't. I can't control that in some people. But face to face, if we need to.
Well, I think it sounds like your answer conveys confidence in the fact that you've had a lot of experience on the field competing with guys. That's kind of familiar
this is,
territory.
As an 8-year-old playing soccer is one thing.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say, I think I was in 5th or 6th grade, and I got nailed in the face with a soccer ball, and that I realized I don't need to play with the boys after. Like, I may be done. This might be my last season playing soccer with the with the boys. So there were some physical
Yes.
aspects of that.
Well, there would be.
There are some jobs that I know I wouldn't be able to do because I'm a smallish, kind of weak 50-year-old woman right now. I would not be a good firefighter. I personally would, just that wouldn't work. Me trying to, haul some big man out of a burning building, like. But this job is, it's a lot of reading and writing and talking and meeting and research, a lot of time spent thinking about what's working, what's not working, who do we need to talk to figure out what would work best, those kinds of things. And so,
which you enjoy, it sounds like, finding solutions.
Strangely, yes.
Nice.
You put it well. Yes. I feel like if I had to write down on paper something fun to do, I wouldn't write that down. But yet that's what I keep being drawn to. I love learning about, like, structures of organizations, what works, what doesn't, what's efficient. In this world, of course, and on the school board too, it was all about using taxpayer money and creating outputs, and so using that money wisely, good stewardship is a big part of that, obviously. What's the best use of those monies? And so that's kind of what I've realized. I've built this career of public service, addressing those questions. And when I stop and think about it, I'm like, why am I doing this? Doesn't sound fun, but I seem to love it. So, sorry.
What would you want people, like, to remember you by? Like, would you want them to remember you for who you were or what you accomplished?
That's another one of those questions I haven't really spent any time thinking about. I do think when politicians start thinking in those terms, things can get a little off track.
Why? Explain that just a little bit, because that's intriguing. If
I
people
think
start thinking what they want to be remembered by, they can get off track. Go ahead.
I think that's veering into a lot of prideful decision making.
How do you avoid pride when you're in a leadership role and everyone knows you and everybody's trying to get your attention or whatever? How do you avoid pride?
So that's something I have to think about almost every day. That's a very good question. And it's something I've realized that has become a big thing for me. We were talking about that natural confidence. I think it's easy for people who have that to be kind of prideful. I mean, we're doing things, we're raising our hand, we're saying, yeah, vote for me. And so naturally, I think it's easy to see some pride build up if you have a long list of, people ask for my resume all the time, hey, you're going to speak at our thing. I want to read this introduction for you. Tell me.
Hearing your bio about yourself.
Right. So yes, in my position as mayor, sometimes daily, I'm asked about, hey, what's your opinion? Mayor, I need to talk to you about this. I know you're the one to get this done. On and on and on. And that can be easily, I can make that very easily about me. And I just have to keep praying about the fact that, none of this job is about me. It's about serving my community. So I do feel like through my Christian faith, this is I mean, if we talk about reading the Bible, it says a lot about fighting off prideful thoughts and not getting sucked into that. And politics is just one of those occupations where it's easy to get sucked into that.
So what's one of the ways it's hard being a Christian leader in a world that's broken?
Y'all are asking some
That's amazing.
big questions.
Hard about being a Christian leader in a broken world. Is that? Wow.
Well, I would start out just by saying I'm a broken individual, so that's the biggest struggle. Knowing that I don't get everything right, not always perfect, as much as I hate to admit it. I like to do things well the first time, and so messing up is just kills me. Having to say I'm sorry is not easy. Sometimes that's required, you know. And then too, I mean, probably most people, unless you're, you know, in an office cubicle by yourself, you're going to interact with people in any job. So in terms of, you know, this job or any other in a broken world, that's just always going to be the case. You know, that aspect of forgiveness for people. I try to, you know, what really helps me a lot too is because on the city council, even in meetings, but also in phone calls and you know, emails and things like that. It's a job where we hear a lot of complaints. We hear a lot about things that aren't going well for somebody in the city, a wide range of things. And sometimes they even like to come to our city council meetings and, you know, stand up at the microphone and holler and say even things in an ugly way even. But what helps me in all of that is just to try to, it's often running through my mind as someone is even perhaps yelling at me, and that is, you know, what is this person really upset about? What is their core problem? And just trying to have patience with people. Usually they're upset for a good reason. Maybe there's just a giant stinking pothole right at the bottom of their driveway, and they hit it every day. And, you know, it's really driving them nuts. And so they finally, there's a lot of thick skin that I've had to cultivate. And that doesn't mean being numb to people. It just means trying to remind myself often that this role is about serving people and serving, you know, their needs in whatever capacity the city can. And so what is their problem? And trying to just kind of have a little buffer between not letting it be personal. So that's not always easy.
I heard a huge emphasis in your answer there of telling yourself this is not personal. This is not against me. This is trying to be a careful listener and
Yes.
really hear what is going on with that person. Even when they're yelling in your face or
Right.
speaking in an ugly way.
Yes. And that phrase, careful listening, is something that I have had to focus on and try to just become better and better. I mean, every day.
Do you
become
have
better.
something for these guys or for me that you have found that is especially helpful to be a careful listener? You know, how have you grown in that way? Is there a practical part of it, or?
For me, and maybe if you ask 10 people, you know, they'll give you 10 different answers. But for me, I think it's just having to take the personal pride out of the equation and realize I am here to serve you in some way. How can I help you in a way that's appropriate, you know, for the city and for my role to do? Sometimes we can't as city council.
You have to tell
mayor.
people no sometimes.
Yes, there's unfortunately a lot of that, which is
You want
sometimes
this, it's not happening.
Yes, and that's the worst. because, most of us are on the city council. We're doers, right? We're problem solvers.
Yeah.
Let me solve this problem for you and make it all better.
Very difficult to look at somebody and say, what you're asking for is not going to happen.
Yes, but we unfortunately have to do that quite a bit. And often maybe it's just a legal thing. Maybe there's a state law that says, you know what, the city can't do this for this person. That sometimes is the case. Sometimes, it's a financial issue. Sometimes there are things that the people want the city to do that just is not appropriate for the city to do. So.
Interesting.
I don't know if that answered your question, but.
And it's good to know that the emphasis of this is Talks with Titans, the idea of passing torches, those wonderful elements or qualities or characteristics that help you step in the direction of leadership, impact, fulfillment, the good stuff, success. Yeah, and I love this opportunity to hear you unpack many of the opportunities that you've had to discover those then share them with these guys. But we probably have time for just another couple of questions and receive more torches.
Did you have any mentors who helped you understand the world of politics?
Well, again, I know college students, for example, who are poli-sci majors who, spend their summers interning in Washington, D.C. or in Jeff City here in Missouri, who are on that track and are, working in some kind of internship, for a senator or a governor or a, whatever. I often think, I kind of chuckle and think, boy, I should have majored in political science and then gotten a business degree and then maybe gone to law school, and then I'd be ready to be mayor. I did none of those things. Because of that, what I've been forced to do is be very curious, ask a lot of questions, and seek out a lot of different people who can offer some wisdom or some input or just some knowledge about whatever thing. These are not even professionals, not even politicians, but for example, there are a lot of people on our city staff who are our city manager. He is a professional in running a city, right? So I ask him for a lot of different input on things. Because it's weird, the city council has to make a lot of the decisions, but we're all volunteers. And so for instance, if, we have to make a decision about something regarding Kappa Park here in Cape Girardeau, our parks director needs to weigh in a lot, and I need to, ask him the right questions and seek out a lot of input from him and various other people if there's some big decision we have to make, right? So I haven't had a professional kind of structured mentor along the way, but reading a lot and asking a lot of questions and if there's something coming up, I might try to talk to 4 or 5 different people. And then looking at, well, how do other cities do this thing, or how do they deal with this problem? I would call those mentors in some way, all those different people. But no, as far as how to be a good politician, I catch myself thinking, we've all watched TV shows and movies that show politicians. But those aren't often very good mentors those aren't good pictures or images of really but culturally, I think we sometimes can get caught in thinking about knowing what a politician should look like because we've seen so many of the same character on TV or whatever. I have often found myself, trying to veer in the opposite direction of that kind of character. So
So, what's one of the pivotal moments that you were like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna run for mayor? Uh, so when did you first like think like I'm actually going to try and do this, and what caused that kind of?
The very first germ of it was years and years ago. I was going through a difficult time because of this thing in our family that had happened, and was in a very deep and intense Bible study group. And I can't even tell you the name of the Bible study that we were doing, but it really led me to really pray about and think about these questions about, okay, God, what do you want me doing? I mean, it was just a basic, I was really just kind of down at the bottom level of what do you want me doing? And where am I supposed to be in this world? You just tell me. And strangely, just out of nowhere, felt like a definite answer was, you can serve Cape Girardeau in local politics. And I remember thinking that's crazy. Okay. But then just a series of events, like I said, led me to then feel like the school board was a good fit for me, and something that I could do to and be helpful and productive in that. And did that, like I said, for 6 years, and found that I really, really enjoyed the work. I really enjoyed the work. And it was kind of a very much like the city council. I mean, you're all of a sudden dealing with issues. You realize, I mean, it's kind of focused on, teachers and students and school facilities, but really just a microcosm of our whole city, right? I mean, I learned a whole lot about just our community and what different families in our community are going through and dealing with, and you see it in the kids that come to school every day, and why are some kids having trouble learning? What is those kinds of things. So that then opened my eyes even more to the broader community and bigger issues of the city of Cape. But yeah, I think it was, really the most truthful answer I can give you is just through my prayer life, and really just wanting to do whatever it was that, do whatever God wanted me to do, whenever and however that was going to look. So.
It's interesting that you experienced the initial prompt in that direction at a low time. A time of great difficulty. Does that happen pretty often in your spiritual growth, your spiritual journey, that you find that in those difficult times, the hard times, you experience more guidance or a closer kind of relational connection with God?
As you're asking that question, I'm thinking of the Psalms, right? Where David and others, are pouring out their guts, and they're going through these difficult, horrible things. And then there's usually this point where they say, but I will turn to you, Lord. There's always not always, but in a lot of them,
Yeah.
You're reading them, you're like, okay, where's the good part? Oh, there, but,
Yeah.
God, my life is so horrible, but I'm going to cling to you, I don't know if all of those, probably many different examples of where those messages might come. That was just one. And sometimes I just need to get out of my own way so that I can hear God's voice more clearly. Sometimes it's during those really hard times when that happens, when you're more desperate, to rely on God.
Yeah. Being a city leader, there's home life. There's mom, there's wife, there's these roles. Does being a city leader how do you keep the priorities, I guess? Because to me, being a city leader seems like everybody always wants you to be available for whatever they need, whenever they need it. And you actually want to serve people. So that seems like it would be a challenge.
It has been.
How do you keep the priorities?
It has been. There are definitely times when, I'll say this, I've had to suss out what's really an emergency and what can perhaps wait till tomorrow.
There you go. What can wait?
What can wait till tomorrow? Is there a phone call? Do I need to take that phone call right now during dinner? Or can I wait until after dinner? Maybe listen to the voicemail message, maybe call them back tonight, or maybe not.
But it's still always decision making, even with that.
Yeah, it's been. It hasn't always been easy.
That's a challenge
for sure.
Wow.
And everybody's emergency is on their own time.
For them, it's right now.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people, they don't have time during their workday, and so they'll get a hold of us after their work is done. So yeah, these are constant questions. Having to, I actually, I'll back up and just say real quickly, I had stomach problems in high school because of stress, and that stress I was putting on myself in many ways. And I started realizing then, as a teenager, that stress management and anxiety and all those things are something I had to pay attention to, and not only pay attention to, but eventually kind of learn some tools and
coping management.
Yeah, time management. Management of expectations, of burdens that I'm putting on my own self. What are things I have to deal with, or what are things I'm making up in my own brain about having to do right now. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. I guess it answers my question.
Yeah.
Well, we are so grateful. I'm personally very grateful for your leadership in our community. And
Thank you.
I'm thankful for our friendship, and of course our kids have been great friends for a number of years, and that's wonderful. So, and you taking time with us to share some of your wisdom and your experiences.
Oh, I appreciate it.
It's a treasure.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's been great.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Talks with Titans. I hope you learned as much as I did, and we hope that you'll join us again 2 Mondays from now as we interview another person who is, through and through, a Titan.